Hello, everyone, and welcome to our next episode of MedSchool Diaries. So happy to have you here with us, and I'm really excited to talk about today's topic. It's one that surprisingly stepped into my life. Oh, wow, no pun intended, but surprisingly arrived in my
Whoa.
life sooner than I thought it would. Um, but I'm so happy to be joined by my incredible co-hosts and panelists. A brief intro, I'm Olivia. I am a second-year medical student, which still feels weird, and I'm getting ready to start my rotations here in about a month. I'll read the prompt for today, and then I'll open it up to have each of our panelists introduce themselves and then start to give their thoughts. I think this is going to be a really fruitful conversation. I'm interested to hear what you guys have to say. I'm already mentally taking notes. Today's prompt is someone wrote in saying, looking back, the biggest mistake I made in my med school career was beginning my formal prep for the step 1 exam too late. For those of you who may not know, the step 1 exam is this infamous exam that all medical students have to take about after their second year of medical school, and it's required to finish medical school. One of many required exams. But basically, it's like the MCAT times 1,000. And this person continues to say, during the first 2 years of medical school, I focused completely on the school resources. Then, when my 6-week dedicated study period began for this exam, it felt like I was actually starting from square one. I had done well on med school exams, but now when it came to putting it all together for this one big test, I was lost. There were so many excellent resources out there specifically for board prep. So if I could do it all over again, I would have began incorporating them much sooner. Lots of thoughts running through my mind, but I think this is expandable to any major exam because anyone on this path and seemingly any other path is going to face massive tests around every corner. So I'm excited to hear your thoughts. Harrison, do you want to kick us off?
Sure, yeah. I like that you said, Olivia, that like this is expandable to other areas of, I guess, other exams. But I even would maybe go a step further and say that this is expandable into like other areas of your education, not just things that you're going to, eventually be tested on. Um, Getting a head start and getting a jump on things and just getting familiar with something before you're formally introduced to it in the classroom can help that classroom session actually be a review session instead of an introductory session. Um, for anyone that studied for any exam, I think the kind of the theme of like repetition and getting more and more familiar with the information, time and time again, the number of times that you see something, every single time that you go through that process, you get better and better at knowing that information and kind of integrating that information. So I think this is applicable to so much more than just step one. It's applicable to, finals, to MCAT, to step one, step two, even med school exams. I mean, the list could go on, right? But I think the important thing to take away from this submission and this discussion is that it's like never too early to get started with things. I've been in med school now for what, 7 days? Like this is my second week, and I'm already thinking about step one. I'm not doing anything for it yet, but I'm already thinking about it and thinking like, am I going to remember when step one comes around? Like what nerve innervates trapezius? Like when am I going to review that? I don't know. So I think this is especially applicable to me personally, but I do think that it's expandable into other areas. And at the end of the day, we kind of need to have that lens that we're looking forward to things without sort of getting lost in like, okay, step one is a year and a half away. Like I need to start studying now. No, I don't. But it might be a good idea when I have some free time over Christmas break, over Thanksgiving break, to just go back and kind of like refresh some things that I've learned this semester. And I think that sort of long-term perspective can kind of help, keep you on top of things and not necessarily allow you to kind of like let all of the stuff that you have previously covered or thought of go at the expense of 6 weeks of hell like this person probably had. I'm sure there are other perspectives out there too, right? Like this is my perspective that I like to get a head start on things. I like to get going early. I like to use all of the time that I have to review. Maybe some people out there would actually prefer to not have all that stress over the first year and a half of medical school or over the first, I don't know, 6 months of studying for the MCAT, over the first, 8 to 10 weeks of a semester before you have to start thinking about finals. Maybe some people out there would actually prefer, you know what, I'm not going to think about that yet. I'm going to wait until the end. And yeah, the last 2 weeks, 6 weeks, however long is going to be hell, but I'll be done with it and it'll be quick. So, there are definitely different perspectives out there and different ways to do it. This discussion is probably just my bias and the way that I like to do things. Um, but I don't know, Maddie, do you agree with this? Do you feel like you operate the same way? Or are you more of a person that likes to wait and I feel like saying cramming has like a negative connotation. I don't think it's always a negative thing to like cram before an exam if that's the way that you've always done things and the way that you've been successful. What techniques have you used or what's your approach?
Yeah, by the way, Maddie, MCAT tutor, pre-med turned not pre-med, but we'll see what goes on with that. But yeah, I totally agree with you, Harrison. I need to read the syllabus and see exactly where we're going so that I can have a big picture kind of mindset. Cramming kind of just, I'm a procrastinator at heart, but cramming also just anxiety, like we talked about the last time. Um, but I think for medicine specifically, I mean, I'm sure it applies to literally everything else, but like we're studying the body, which is multiple systems, but in order to like be a good doctor, you want to be able to see the full picture. How is the all the systems working together? I kind of think of studying in that way as well. Like, no, maybe this week I'm learning about neurons or I'm learning about muscles, but like the big picture, those things work together. The nerves innervate the muscles, and it like studying muscles doesn't make sense unless you know the nerves. So I kind of take that approach to preparation. And I also think you could take it maybe even one step further. And like for me, part of trying to decide if I was going to apply to medical school were the tests, the big tests, the steps, and all of those stuff that I knew was coming. And that also factored into my decision to hold off for a little bit, at least for now. Um, so I do think um, being like kind of a big picture person is a great skill, I think, to have while you're going into the field of medicine, like to be able to see the body holistically, your study plan holistically, a person holistically, like that kind of theme just characterizes what that career is from my perspective, at least. But Olivia, do you have a different opinion?
Yeah, I think I'm right in between the two of you. It funny you mentioned this. I am a full year out from taking step one, um, at the minimum, and I we do our like curriculum sort of backwards here, and I am getting ready to start rotations, but I'm literally like holding the step one book in my hands, because someone told me just like skim it, read a couple sentences and see how you feel. And so I think I'm falling right in between in the sense that I completely agree. I learn things best when I see it for multiple times. And that's sort of how I've been taught to that I am best at learning. But I also am coming around to the idea of for the rest of my life, I have to accept the fact that I will always be learning how to learn. And every piece of information that I'm responsible for can't always be absorbed by my brain in the same way. Like my last year of medical school, for example, there were some blocks where like I could just stare at my notes for just long enough and I'd be like, okay, I can go to sleep. I feel like I get this. Other blocks, I cannot sit still. I have to get a whiteboard. I have to draw it out. Otherwise, it's not going to make sense. Other blocks, I can't be by myself. I need to talk to someone and explain it and talk it through. And I kept telling myself, like, who am I? Have I lost my sense of routine? Like, it wasn't like this before, but it's just me always learning how to learn and accepting the fact that it's really okay to switch up your routine and switch up your style based on the particular beast of an exam that you're getting ready for. Whether that's the tweaks between each med school exam or step one or the MCAT or a college exam, especially in college when you're facing like 5 courses, every course might require you to study in a completely different way. And I think being okay with that and maybe repetitions isn't the way to go for one exam. And you do need to say, I need to focus on just this for a really long time and that's okay. And for some people, that's how they study for step one. They just wait till dedicated and say, I am okay with being overwhelmed, but as long as I can give all of my energy to this, that's okay. I'm currently in the boat where I have no clue what I'm going to do. I'm going to peek at it right now and see, like, am I overwhelmed right now? And then sort of go from there. But yeah, I think accepting that it's okay to not learn the same as everyone else, for starters, like YouTube and all of these resources telling you this is how you study to get this, can be a really scary and intimidating place. Do not be afraid to do what you need to do and explore, play around with it. Like, stumbling and falling is par for the course. It's going to happen. But by the end, just know that you have like this whole Rolodex of study skills that you can whip out at any time because you're prepared for it and you're still learning and evolving and making sure that you're ready for whatever exam or life circumstance is coming next. That's where I'm sitting.
Olivia, I think it was really interesting that you brought up the fact that as whether you're going to be a doctor or anyone else in the medical field, a PA, an MA, a nurse, literally anyone in the medical field, you're going to have to keep learning quite literally the rest of your life.
Mm-hmm.
I just had a lecture this morning from a geneticist who like laid out on a slide for us that the current rate as of like yesterday, the current rate of medical knowledge doubling is 73 days.
Whoa.
73 days. So in, call it 2 months, right? In 2 months, the medical knowledge that we currently have is going to be doubled. Like, that's insane. That's crazy. There's no way that a human being could ever learn all of that stuff that quickly, right? But we do need to at least learn some of that and keep ourselves abreast of that as things move forward. So yeah, I mean, we're going to have to keep learning this stuff the rest of our lives. We're going to have to keep studying. Yes, there are exams involved, but there are also not exams involved. There are people's lives involved.
Right.
And we are going to be physicians who will need to, know this stuff and need to kind of keep up with the times, if you will. So I really think that that's an important idea, and it helps put these exams and tests in perspective that, like, yes, these are exams, and yes, you need to complete them and do well on them. But at the end of the day, it's also your career, and you are also, entering a field where you may very well have people's lives in your hands on a daily basis. So it's not just, oh, I'm studying for an exam. It's, I'm making sure that I know this stuff so that I don't mess up when I have someone's life in my hands.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I think that the MCAT 2 is such like one of those, the first big test that you're gonna have to take. And it's going to prepare you for how you're gonna study for step one probably a little bit. Hopefully that like study process will carry over and it'll be a good one. But yeah, personally I had major anxiety when trying to figure out when to start studying, how much to study. I think you have to listen to your past experience and also like your current situation. Like for me, I started studying during the pandemic and I was like, okay, I'm going to study everything in 3 months. And then I had like palpitations for like the whole day. So I was like, okay, maybe I need to extend it for 6 months and like be the extra person that I want to be and make my Excel sheet and plan out each day or whatever. That's what I felt like I needed to do. And one thing I wish I did a little bit earlier was actually take a diagnostic.
Mm.
That's something that we recommend to all of our students that we tutor, and something that it's because I didn't do it too. So I think taking like one of the AAMC practice exams, I think the sample test is free, will really show you like, hey, you suck at this and you're really good at this. So like maybe you need to spend 2 weeks on metabolism and you don't need to review all the gen chem for the same amount of time. Being able to like kind of give yourself like an idea of what you need to be working on and focusing on rather than spending equal time. Like Olivia said, we don't have to spend equal time studying in the same way for everything. that was something that I wish I really did, instead of like the couple of weeks before my test, realizing I need to really just dive into physics because it doesn't make any sense to me. Yeah, that was one thing I wish I would have done better. And Anki, starting that earlier as well, I think is that's the key ingredient, if I'm gonna be honest. But I'm sure Harrison has some additional advice as a tutor himself too.
Yeah, I know we're going to talk about Anki at some point. I didn't use Anki at all for MCAT studying. So, like, I think
He's a
that's going to be an
genius,
interesting
folks.
discussion when it does come up. Um, okay, so the nice part about taking an exam this big and this stressful, which sounds weird coming out of it, the nice part, yeah, right. Like, it's not nice, but it is in a way because there are so many people who have done it before you that, you know, some people literally make a profession out of teaching other people how to study for the MCAT. So there are literally people out there who have done this before, so many people, and there are people making a living teaching how to do this every single day.
Mm-hmm.
Our company is one example, right? Um, and so I think it is, I'll say imperative. I I think it really is imperative that you um, know what you're getting into before you get into it.
Mm-hmm.
And um, I say that to mean that, Maddie, you said that you had an Excel sheet and you were like planning out what you're going to study day by day. I think that's such a good idea. Maybe not to that extreme for like everybody. Not everyone's going to
Sure.
benefit from that, but at least knowing what is out there, knowing what you have to accomplish between now and test day, knowing, okay, I have a chemistry book, a biochemistry book, a biology book, a physics book, et cetera, et cetera. I got to get through all these chapters, planning out the chapters, planning out maybe the concepts. No one plan is going to work for everyone, but the fact that so many people have done this before means that there are resources out there on Google, on YouTube, like literally just Google, how do I study for the MCAT? And you can see like a variety of different ways to study for the MCAT. And I guess my only advice would be, with that plethora of knowledge that's out there, kind of hone in or key in on the strategies that you have used before, and learn from the people that sort of also use those same strategies. You don't want to go out and like, I didn't use Anki at all, so I wouldn't want to go Google and say, read an article about how useful Anki is and then switch everything up and start using Anki all of a sudden. Like, I want to stick with what I've done before. And so I think that is an important thing to remember, is that like other people have done this before, other people have struggled, other people have learned how to attack exams this big and how to tackle things as daunting as studying for the MCAT. So use their resources, learn from them, do some pre-work before you jump into studying. Maybe you have to research for a few hours and look at, what exactly is on the MCAT? What do I have to learn? What do I feel comfortable with? What do I not feel comfortable with? One of the things that I used to do with a lot of my students was take them through every single chapter of the Kaplan books just by the title of the chapter. And I would have them rank, scale from 1 to 10. How difficult do you think this is for you? Scale from 1 to 10. What is the yield on the exam? And after doing that, we would come to a kind of a final calculation, a final number of, okay, metabolism, you really don't feel good about, and it's high yield on the exam. So we should probably start by, focusing on these things like metabolism. And that's assuming that they had the science background to kind of understand what was going on in metabolism, right? So I wouldn't just say like, oh, jump into that before knowing chemistry or knowing organic chemistry or anything like that. But I think it is, again, imperative and useful to go into studying for the MCAT knowing what you need to accomplish between now and between test day. Olivia, do you think that still applies for someone like you who's like in medical school taking exams? I presume like fairly often. Do you think that like knowing what you need to know before the whole study process starts is that something that you use, or is that helpful for you?
Absolutely. as you were talking there, I was having flashbacks to when I took the MCAT, and I'm not an MCAT tutor, but I did all the things that you just said not to do. Don't know how I managed to get by, but I did not know what I was getting into. I was like the one person who was like, I can't wait to take the MCAT. Like, it's a scary test, but that's okay. It's going to be so much fun. I'll make a plan. I'll make my big Excel sheet. And I really tried, but it fell through. And I was falling down. Instead of like going to like approved resources or going directly to the test makers, I was like falling into these YouTube rabbit holes of like, I studied in 3 weeks to take the MCAT. And I was like sending myself into a panic. I didn't have great resources or support. I didn't have people around me like you guys, like this company, who I could go to and just say, I don't know where to begin. Man, oh man, do I wish I had done it. I was definitely the person who 2 weeks before my exam, 1 month before my exam, would completely switch my study routine. I switched it probably 5 times. Up until the exam, I was like, I'm spending more time learning a new study routine than learning the material. So yes, wish I had taken all of that advice back in the day. But now it absolutely still applies. Like I just said, I'm like peaking at the step 1 exam and taking the time due to approved resources and people at my institution and students who have taken the exam and are real people willing to talk to me and took an appropriate amount of time to study for it and asking, what the heck is this? I'm no longer walking in wide-eyed and bushy-tailed, not knowing what's going on. And collecting all of that information as early and as often as possible. No shame in getting tons of information from a couple of different people and seeing what really resonates with you. I'm still in the information collection phase. But yeah, definitely not walking into big exams naive anymore. Definitely going to stick to one study plan and definitely going to get help early and often. It never hurts. It really doesn't. And as confident as I may feel about like, yep, it's another test, one of many I'll take, I'm getting help early and often.